What's up, everyone? It's Ruby here, bringing you guys another video. Today we are discussing the topic of my DCU villain wish list. These are the ones that I want to see in the DCU. If I had my way, these are the ones that I would pick. Now, I do want to say that I understand that there are, I'm not really looking at the ones that are more common. I'm not really looking at the ones that are kind of obvious. I'm also not really looking at the teams. I'm mainly looking at people who can carry their own solo film. These will be, the main villains of the movie and would still be really interesting and, kind of different arcs as well. I was thinking about different arcs you could do. So that's kind of my mindset going in. Some of these characters you guys probably know. Some of them you might not know if you're not too familiar with the DCU or the DC universe and DC Comics and that kind of thing. So let's get into it. So let's start off with Superman villains. These are Superman Legacy. Makes sense to start with Superman villains. So my first choice, obviously I would want Lex Luthor to be in the film and be a villain. But I don't think he should be the only villain because I think that's it's been done before. And I think it also not as interesting. I mean, he definitely is interesting as a villain, but in the grand scheme of things, I don't think it will hold for the whole movie. So this is who I think would make a really good Superman villain. And I limited myself to 3 choices. I did initially have a long list, but I ultimately held myself back and said, okay, let's look at this if I were doing a trilogy. How would I do this? So one of my choices was Metallo. Also, this is not necessarily in the order I would have them appear, although they could be. Metallo is a really good villain because he is literally made of Superman's weakness, kryptonite. He's also starts as a human being. He's just a regular dude, and he gets this surgery, and he basically turns into a kryptonite weapon that also would be a really good way of introducing Lex Luthor, because Lex Luthor is the one who creates him. So you would have this dynamic between Lex Luthor and Metallo, as well as Metallo and Superman. Ultimately, Metallo does want to try to kill Superman for whatever reason. Why? There's definitely a number of reasons why he likes to kill Superman. Mostly because that's kind of his only purpose, is to kill Superman. And so he doesn't really have that many options. The next one I would do, not to say the next one, but one of the other villains I would do is Mongul. For those of you who don't know, Mongul basically is kind of like a conqueror. He does this thing called War World, where it's basically this Coliseum type thing, where he gets different aliens and different beings to fight against each other. And one of the things that he gets is Superman. Superman is kind of in space. He gets abducted by Mongul, and he's made to fight in the ring with a guy named Drago. So I think having a movie centered around Warworld would actually be kind of interesting, and it could lead into potentially future battles, future movies. Who knows? But I think it would be quite interesting to do a Warworld focused movie with a Superman movie, nonetheless. It would definitely be kind of interesting to see how they would go about that and how they would implement Mongul into the greater universe. And then, of course, Brainiac. Brainiac, surprisingly, hasn't really been done too many times in live action. Probably because he's very complicated to do, because he has a lot of CGI, a lot of, you could do practical effects for most of it and then do CGI later. But he's very much a CGI heavy kind of character, so it's probably why we haven't really seen him in the live action sense. But again, he, like I've said before, he would be a great way to start off Superman Legacy, because he speaks to Superman's Kryptonian side. Usually his villains are more like Superman villains, but Brainiac is one of the few that is really a Kal-El villain. And that's what makes him so interesting, and why he is so well liked as a villain, is because he kind of has this personal attachment with Superman, because he is the one who is responsible for basically destroying Krypton, or at least not giving the Kryptonians enough warning for them to save themselves. He knew that the planet was going to get destroyed. He just didn't tell them because he wanted to be the only one left standing. So that's kind of why they have this dynamic with each other. And it would be really fascinating to kind of see how he is handled in the live action sense. And I think he would honestly be a really good choice to have as a starting villain, and also as a reoccurring villain. Then let's move on to Batman. Who's Batman for us? Now, Batman has a long list of rogue gallery members. Obviously, the Joker is one of them. I did not include the Joker in this this list, because he's kind of an obvious choice. There's kind of other villains that I think would do an interesting job at being a solo villain. A villain who would stand on their own, in their own movie, that would really work. So I really thought about this, because there's a lot of great rogue gallery villains, but a lot of them kind of rely on there being other villains to kind of like balance it out. Like, it wouldn't be able to be like a long movie, because some villains, a little bit more like smaller villains, or more like annoying, but these are the ones that I chose. Okay, so we have Mr. Freeze. Mr. Freeze deserves a redemption arc. Okay, he was absolutely slandered the last time he was in live action. And I think you guys know the last time he was in live action. Mr. Freeze absolutely could be a solo villain character. He has a very compelling story of his own. He's trying to save his wife, who has a very rare disease that would otherwise kill her if she were to be... And so he basically uses cryogenic science to help save his wife, and she has an incurable disease, and it kind of brings up this kind of human side, sort of, with the Batman villains that people kind of really gravitate towards and like. I mean, imagine this was your wife, or your husband, or your spouse. Like, imagine this was someone that you really cared about. Like, could you really just let them go, or would you do anything to save them? And that's really the dilemma that Mr. Freeze brings, that is not always fully understood. I mean, there's ice puns, but really it's kind of a man who is desperate to save his wife, and that is something that I think would be really compelling in a Batman movie. The other one that I would do is Scarecrow. Scarecrow, very interesting villain. Imagine Scarecrow handled by a horror director, like James Wan or something like that. I feel like the best way to do Scarecrow is to do him like a horror villain, because he is a horror villain, and it would be kind of absolutely amazing to have like a Batman horror movie and have Scarecrow be the main villain in that movie. I also had Lady Shiva in this list. I took her out because I think overall, like, I was really trying to stick to 3 villains, but I definitely think Lady Shiva would be interesting as a Batman Brave and the Bold villain, because she, I know a lot of people were saying Deathstroke. Obviously Deathstroke is kind of an obvious choice, but Deathstroke is also more of a Nightwing villain, not necessarily a Batman villain. I mean, he has been a Batman villain for a little bit, but he really is a Nightwing villain. So that's why people are like, not Deathstroke. Deathstroke is a really good villain, but not for Batman. Although he could be. But Lady Shiva would be interesting because she has kind of the ties to the League of Assassins a little bit. She has a daughter, Cassandra Cain, ends up becoming Batgirl at one point, protege of Barbara Gordon during her Oracle phase. Very temporary, but it would be Lady Shiva would be good to tie the Batman movies into the greater DCU storyline. I think that kind of having Cassandra Cain in the background and like really setting that up for a later movie would be very interesting. For Scarecrow, I think you could also do something similar, where he's very much a horror-focused villain, but you could have the different little Easter eggs during the movie that would really set up the greater DCU for later, and even potentially set up more horror DC films along the way. Like, you have Swamp Thing, that would very much be another horror-based DC movie or series. You also have like Solomon Grundy, which is not really horror, but still very compelling characters. And so I think having a horror element to the DCU is exactly what we need, because it's always great to see like the different genres implemented into the superhero universe. And I definitely think horror is one of those that really works well with the DC characters, because there's a lot of kind of horrific villains that exist in the DCU. I mean, in the DC comics, and you know what I mean. But the last but not least, I would definitely have Poison Ivy. Poison Ivy is probably one of the few villains that could absolutely 100% have her own solo movie. Like, just straight out, she could be the main character, main villain. Whatever you want her to be, she can be that, because she is absolutely powerful. She has this kind of like seductiveness to her, so she would be really good in kind of being a villain towards Batman, and not just Batman, but also Bruce Wayne, because Bruce Wayne's a little bit of a player, a little bit of a playboy, and so he would probably be a little bit compelled by Pamela Isley, and kind of flirty, and maybe that kind of goes backwards because she uses that to her advantage, and so that could be something that would be done. She's taken on many heroes in the past as well, not just Batman, but other characters as well, including like Supergirl and stuff like that. So again, definitely would be very interesting, especially in a Gotham City Sirens context, where she has not only herself but also Harley and potentially Catwoman as well. So definitely would very much love to see her in a proper DC project. Again, slandered. The reason why she's not in any DCU movie since is because she was slandered in the last project she was in with Uma Thurman. But this time, it would be different. It would be a lot more classy. You could also, technically speaking, do a little bit of horror with Poison Ivy as well. Definitely could do some jump scares, do some like psychological horror manipulation, that kind of thing. It would kind of be interesting to see it that way. Not exactly the approach that I would take, but kind of interesting. Anyways, let's move on to Wonder Woman. Now, obviously the first one, we have to talk about it. Cheetah, we need a proper Cheetah. The 1984 Cheetah did not work, okay? The reason why it didn't work is because it really didn't set up their friendship beforehand. I think really the true story with Cheetah is to set up their friendship and really show how they're like the best friends of like all time, like lovely best friends. And Barbara and Minerva, she's technically Minerva, Barbara, Minerva, whatever. Minerva basically gets a little bit too curious, and that kind of hurts her because she gets cursed. She gets the Cheetah curse. Kind of not the way that 84 did it, but still a kind of interesting approach, kind of like the best friend betrayal. And Wonder Woman later kind of learns that she is like, that's her best friend. That's her best friend that is turning against her. And they kind of just, Minerva is just too, like, power hungry. She doesn't really want to be good anymore kind of thing. So I think you could definitely do a much more compelling Cheetah and Wonder Woman storyline, and also not only that, but show kind of the dynamics of the characters when between Barbara and Diana, and now Wonder Woman and Cheetah, and showing why Cheetah is such a powerful villain against Diana. I definitely think that they missed that in 84. I think they could have done a much better job with that storyline. Also, there was just too much going on with 84. I think the problem with 84 is that it was too crowded. There was too much going on. They were trying to set up Simon Stagg, and they were trying to, have Maxwell Lord, which should have been a much more bigger villain anyways. Kind of weird the way that they did it, but, it is what it is, I guess. Then we would have Circe. Circe, very great villain. Would absolutely be able to do a solo movie. It would be kind of like Greek-based a little bit. But Circe is just the wicked and magical. And she definitely goes toe-to-toe with Wonder Woman a lot. So she would be very much a recurring villain. She kind of takes on she's the villain of really just the Amazons in general. So it would definitely be interesting to see her in Paradise Lost. I kind of think that she's gonna be in Paradise Lost. I don't know if she is, because it's kind of a little bit unclear about what Paradise Lost is supposed to really be. I mean, they say Game of Thrones, but on Themyscira, but it's kind of a weird approach. But okay. I think that there might be a little bit more to it than that, but who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. But either way, Circe would make a very great villain for sure. It should definitely not be underestimated. Now, this one might be a little bit controversial, but I definitely want to see this villain brought to the big screen, and that is Genocide. Genocide is from the Gail Simone comic books, that storyline. And that storyline is probably one of my personal favorites because it's so jarring and it's so compelling at the same time. The concept of genocide is basically that genocide is basically a reflection of everything dark about Wonder Woman. It's kind of like the dark clone of Wonder Woman, but even worse. Because this genocide right here goes after all of her friends. Because Genocide knows everything that Diana knows. She knows the secrets behind Superman's weakness, how to kill the Justice League, and how to kill Wonder Woman herself. She uses the lasso against Wonder Woman herself. And the way that she does it is so mind-blowing, because when you read it for the first time, it's like you can't really believe that this is real. Because the story is just so good. If you have never read the Gail Simone Wonder Woman storyline, I highly recommend it. You don't necessarily need too much context other than the fact that it takes place after Infinite Crisis. Which, if you don't know what Infinite Crisis is, basically, there's this infamous scene in Infinite Crisis. The only thing that you really need to know. And it involves actually Maxwell Lord. And if you don't want to know, you can skip ahead. But basically, Maxwell Lord kind of crosses the line, right? He does a lot to kind of attack Wonder Woman's friends, and does cause quite a few murders. And so Diana's solution to this is to snap the neck of Maxwell Lord, and it's in front of everyone. Everyone sees this. And it kind of ruins Wonder Woman's reputation for a while. People don't really like the fact that she just murders Maxwell Lord, just snaps his neck, and people are just kind of like outraged that this is what Wonder Woman is. This is like this is the model for like women around the world, is just kill the guy you don't like. And so it's very an interesting storyline, because this storyline, the Genocide storyline, comes after that. It's after that. And it's kind of like it's just the aftermath, basically. It's very good. Definitely recommend reading that storyline. Not necessarily, well, Infinite Night Crisis is good too, but especially reading the Gail Simone comic books. It's like, it goes 30 issues or something like that. It's kind of long, but it really drags you along the way. And it's just so good. It's just so good. Anyways, the next one we're going to talk about, and the last one, almost the last one, is Green Lantern. We're talking about some Green Lantern villains because, well, it's kind of interesting because the Green Lantern is supposed to cover both John Stewart and Hal Jordan. But I think either way, you can still use these villains, whether it's, both or one or the other. But I kind of thought about it like, these would be the villains like if both are involved, or if like these would kind of be the villains for the Green Lantern Corps, not necessarily just them, but like the Green Lanterns in general. So the first one would be kind of an obvious choice, is Star Sapphire. For those of you who don't know who Star Sapphire is, this is Carol Ferris. If you saw the Green Lantern live-action movie, Carol Ferris was supposed to be what Blake Lively's character is. Carol Ferris is the love interest of Hal Jordan. Not just a love interest, but, deeply loved, sometimes wife, sometimes, like, girlfriend, sometimes just, like, someone who really means a lot to Hal. But either way, she is the lover of Hal Jordan. And you might think, why is she a villain? Why did she become a villain? Well, she becomes the member of the Star Sapphires. The Sapphire Lanterns basically have, they're the Lanterns of Love. But they're mostly, they're a female-only thing. They're a female-only thing, and it kind of, there's different takes on Star Sapphire. There's not always just one storyline. But you can imagine kind of like the lover to enemies kind of story. Like, usually there's like enemies to lovers, but this is lovers to enemies. So they become kind of rivals because they are not in the same corps together. And in fact, they're kind of... I feel like, would be a more compelling villain than Sinestro. Because Sinestro is interesting because, Sinestro is supposed to be the mentor of Hal Jordan, and then turns evil, turns to the Yellow Lanterns. But Star Sapphire follows a similar storyline, except she is the lover of Hal Jordan. Like, she knows him. Like, she grew up with him kind of thing. And she is now evil kind of thing. And so that's why I think, in many ways, Star Sapphire would be a much more compelling villain than Sinestro. Because we've seen Sinestro before. Everybody knows Sinestro. But not many people know about Star Sapphire. I mean, she was in Justice League, the animated series and everything. But no one really knew who she was. I think if you have a storyline with Hal Jordan, and you're going through the villains that he should be going against, you can't do Hal Jordan's storyline without having Star Sapphire in there. You just can't. It just is it's honestly kind of a shocking story sometimes when it's told, anyways. Then the next one I would have is Atrocitus. Atrocitus is the Red Lantern. Now, everybody knows Sinestro, of course, But Atrocitus is so much more evil because he's just like a monster. So basically, the Red Lanterns, for those of you who don't know, when the Red Lanterns take their oath, they cannot take off their rings. Because here's the thing. Their rings actually destroy their organs and their vitals. And so the only thing keeping the Red Lanterns alive is their ring. And they must feed off of rage and anger. And they grow powerful when people are angry and when people are, wrath. Wrath is their hunger. They are very wrathful. And that's what makes the Red Lantern so interesting. And that's why Atrocitus should definitely be a Green Lantern villain, in the DCU, because he would be so interesting to do. He's just kind of this monster, this harbinger. No, not really harbinger, but the Red Lantern Corps in general would make a very interesting villain for the Green Lantern Corps. And they are. And now, this one might be a little bit controversial as well. Because the question is, how would you do this villain in a way where this is in a movie, but doesn't affect the bottom line, and doesn't affect the rest of the story? And it kind of is difficult to do. Because the next villain is none other than Black Hand. The Black Lantern. And not just any Black Lantern, the leader of the Black Lanterns. You might not know who this is, but a lot of people, especially DC comic book fans, know who this is. This is the main villain of Blackest Night. Blackest Night is one of the greatest comic book storylines of all time, considered highly by many comic book fans. It's up there with Dark Knight Returns. It's up there with All-Star Superman. It's up there with Kingdom Come. It is very popular. And that's why I feel like eventually, not right away, this storyline needs to be told. But maybe tweaked a little bit, because the storyline does get kind of out of hand. And so basically, the Black Lanterns... How to describe the Black Lanterns? The Black Lanterns, basically, if you know how DC characters, they sometimes die, right? They die, sometimes they come back to life and everything. Well, basically, Black Hand takes every dead DC character and brings them back to life, but as a Black Lantern. And so, basically, he turns the entire DC graveyard into villains. And not just any villains, powerful ones. And so, the ones, it's kind of almost like The Walking Dead in a way, because it's like turning your loved ones against you. So you don't want to kill them, although they're already kind of dead, but you don't really want to kill them because, you love them, and you know them, and you know that that's not really them, but at the same time, you still need to stop them. Now, the reason why I say that they shouldn't necessarily go by the source materials in this one is because later on, Barry Allen, who was dead at this point, comes back from the dead, but not in the way you would think. He actually creates what is called the White Lantern Corps. And basically, this is kind of like the contrast of heaven and hell, right? Black Hand, very much the hell. But Barry Allen, the White Lanterns, very much the heaven sort of thing. Now, you could do a kind of a hell versus heaven kind of storyline. The only thing is that the White Lanterns kind of ruins everything, because the reason why it ruins everything is anyone who was dead previously is now alive. And anyone who dies from here on out could technically be brought back to life by the White Lanterns. And so this is why it doesn't really work, because when you have a death in the DC Comics, now you're like, okay, now they're going to become a White Lantern. That's why it's an Elseworld story and not a mainstream story. But I still think you could do Black Hand in a way where it's not, like, earth-shattering and, like, doesn't ruin the entire universe. Maybe. Maybe down the line, or maybe they just keep it like that and just have the White Lanterns exist. Maybe you can probably write it in a way where the White Lanterns don't really work. It's kind of what happened. Well, what actually happened is that the White Lanterns became the thing and everything. And then we restarted the universe again because we can't have the White Lanterns because it ruins every storyline going forward. Probably one of the reasons why we reset the universe. And now, lastly, let's talk about Justice League villains, because let's get them out of the way. These are the ones that could really be, like, and the reason why I said I didn't include, like, groups in this is that I'm not including the Injustice League. I'm not including Legion of Doom because it kind of is a cheap way out and being basically like every villain is going to be the villain of this movie. No. I kind of have different ideas on what could possibly work. So obviously we have Darkseid. Darkseid is kind of an obvious one. Darkseid, very common, very popular, very compelling as well. Could easily do like Granny Goodness and the Furies, and he needs to be done properly, but probably later down the line. Not the first choice I would go with because, well, we already know that the first choice is going to be the center anyways. It's going to be like the frontier and everything. But these are kind of like after that. So Darkseid, definitely an option to do. Probably one of the more popular ones. But also, oh, I did the wrong thing. Okay, also the Anti-Monitor. So, Anti-Monitor basically is the one responsible for you guys probably know who this is. He's the villain of Crisis. He's the main villain of Crisis on Infinite Earths. And he's the one responsible for ruining the multiverse for 2 seconds before we remade the multiverse again. Yeah, this is one of the resets that happened. This is kind of the reset that happened. And then we had like the universe that everybody kind of knows. Anti-Monitor is kind of a reoccurring villain as well. He's not just that villain. In fact, let me just make sure. Yeah, so basically he is responsible for Crisis of Infinite Earths, which I don't think they would necessarily do because Crisis of Infinite Earths doesn't only really works if you already have a multiverse, and we don't yet, or at least maybe there's not really a plan to do so. But you can still have the Anti-Monitor because he's also the villain to like the Green Lantern Corps and the Justice League, and so he himself can still be a villain without there being a Crisis of Infinite Earths. If that makes sense. Like, you can still have him as a villain. He's a very powerful villain. Just not necessarily for Crisis. I mean, you could do Crisis, sure. Crisis, I mean, people would be down for Crisis on Infinite Earths, but probably not in this context. Probably not right now. And then, I kind of spoiled it already, but I think something that people don't really talk about is the Crime Syndicate. They are, if you guys have ever seen the Justice League, what's it called? See, sometimes my encyclopedia kind of fails. Oh yeah, Crisis on 2 Earths. That's what it is. So, basically, Crime Syndicate is the evil version of the Justice League. It's also what the Justice Lords is kind of based on a little bit. But basically, the Crime Syndicate is the Justice League, but they're evil. They're on a separate parallel Earth. Again, this is where like the multiverse kind of comes in. So because of the multiverse, there are different versions of these heroes. And there's Crime Syndicate. So, potentially you could do Crime Syndicate first, and then you do, like, Anti-Monitor and everything else. Because that's kind of the order that it kind of is supposed to go in. Well, actually, Crime Syndicate kind of happens before Flashpoint. Flashpoint kind of, like, just... Flashpoint more so leads into New 52, although it's not going to do that this time. But that's fine. That's fine. We're kind of working with, like, jumbled storylines a little bit, but I think that's actually fine. It's probably better that way anyways, because I don't think we need 1 million restarts. And I don't think the mainstream audience will be able to handle so many restarts. The amount of restarts that we've had in the DC universe and the DC comics. But, still, Crime Syndicate would definitely be very good, and I think it would be interesting to see how they're done in the live-action sense. They're done in the animation, but obviously you would kind of have to either have characters, like actors that look like the characters, or have them play their opposite role, kind of have that confrontation. Either one could kind of work because they are supposed to be like the opposite versions. But who knows? Definitely an option. And these are definitely not the only villains I would want to see. I have a lot more on the list. But these are like the main ones. These are the ones that, like, for sure I would love to see. But I wouldn't be upset if there was others included. I wouldn't be upset if we see something else. Like, I'm definitely down for the center and seeing how that is going to be done in a live action sense and how that's going to be set up. Very much looking forward to Justice League New Frontier, and hope you guys are too. Comment down below, what villains would you want to see in the DCU? What villains do you think would make compelling villains for, like, a solo movie? Like, they're the main villain of the movie. Who do you think should be in the DCU in general? Like, even if they're smaller villains, who do you think should be included? Let me know down in the comments below. Leave a like on this video, and subscribe for more content like this. I'll catch you guys next time. Peace out, guys. It's been a blast. I'll catch you guys next time. Bye.